My name is Katie Hodges, and welcome to my podcast. Hi, everybody. I'm really excited about this episode today. And also, I actually already wrote another episode. I wrote two episodes at once unintentionally and ended up splitting them because I really wanted to develop each of the ideas more. And feels really good. And I'm really proud of it. And, I'm going to introduce a bunch of topics that are kind of might seem obvious, but then kind of go into them a little bit. And there are some more topics that I'm sure I'm going to cover for the rest of my life because it's stuff that I really struggle with. And yeah, so let's get started. Okay, so this episode is going to be about something I struggle with a lot, which is anxiety. I struggle with anxiety so much. I have my whole life. I was diagnosed really young and like in my early teens. Um, and, I go through phases where I'm better and it's not there all the time. And then I go through phases where it's just debilitating. And it usually ends up when I am in a long state of anxiety, it usually ends up being one of the triggers for me to go into a depression because in day-to-day life, I'm not depressed. I don't know if I really say I have depression as an ailment. Um, but I definitely have anxiety and I think it triggers a depression. But I definitely have anxiety and obviously those two can be connected. I'm really interested in the body and health and how all of this relates to myself. One of the breakthroughs that I had that helped get me out of a hold earlier this year and helped me finally break out of the rut I was in was realizing that I had choices over how I felt and my reactions, that I had control over myself. I was the only one who had control over myself. I'm the only one who has the responsibility of how I feel and how I act. And what got me there is the fact that the body and the mind are connected. And I've never understood this in a way. And this was the big breakthrough that made me connect all the little dots, like everything, loved ones had said to me, everything that I had read, all the podcasts I watched, and connect them all together. And it was that, I never really understood what was happening, not only in my mind, but with anxiety comes a very physical aspect. If you have anxiety like I do, and your body becomes out of your control. Like it's almost like you are not in control of your body or you are not in your body. It's there's so many different things that happen. Like you can shake, you can sweat, you can feel freezing. There's so many physical aspects of it. And realizing that my body affects my mind and my mind affects my body and that I can control one with the other changed everything for me. It changed this started of this big change because it connected everything else to me. And I finally understood so much other stuff that I had learned or heard. And I know it sounds so simple. And maybe everybody else thinks like this. Maybe they don't. But for some reason, it changed me. It was so profound to me that I didn't understand it before. That I could control my thinking with my body and I can control my body with my mind. If I'm hyperventilating, I can use my mind to slow my breathing, to calm myself down. If I'm having an anxiety attack, I can jump up and start moving my body or something silly like that, and it'll literally lessen my mental stress or my anxiety. It's crazy. So realizing that these were connected was profound for me because I finally understood why these feelings were happening to me, because I understood that they were a stress response. I understood that they were instilled in us by evolution, that I'm not broken. I might, have the switch turned up to 11 all the time, but I'm not. Everybody is the same. We all have the same issues, the same struggles, because we all evolved as a species with the same evolutionary tools. I mean, Mother Nature put these things in us for a reason to help us survive as a species, because obviously the point of evolution is for us to live long enough to have multiple generations and stay alive, to take care of them and pass on knowledge. So, understanding this was like a light bulb to me. So, with that in mind, one of the things that really interested me was the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So, I'm going to get into those if you've never heard them before. The sympathetic nervous system is best known for like the fight or flight response. And the parasympathetic is rest and digest, which you might think they would be switched, because sympathetic sounds laid back, but it's actually the opposite. And if you ever kind of mix them up and try and remember just the fact that sympathetic sounds more chill, and just remember it's the opposite. I mean, I literally have to go through that pattern in my brain every time. So if I mess it up or mix them up, forgive me, because I have to go through that whole little process just to remember which one's which. But basically, it's super interesting, and it's science I want to get into and do more research on. So I have some like little pieces here, but I just kind of wanted to focus a little bit more on just an intro and a broad spectrum, kind of relating a lot to anxiety. So I'll get more sciencey later. I do have a couple quotes and articles and stuff that I looked up, so those will be cited in the details. And then how like anxiety and stress and being in a constant stress response can start to cause not only just physical reactions in the moment, but long-term physical issues and problems and ailments. And then I'm going to try and go over some solutions, some things that work for me, things that may not have necessarily worked for me, but that I've either read about multiple times or heard about from multiple experts. So I don't want to discount them. And also, things that just make sense to me, even if I haven't tried them yet. So, yeah, we're going to get into it. Let's see how I do. So, anxiety. Anxiety is a monster that you can't control unless you learn the tools. I think it can be managed really well for some people on medication. I don't think that is my choice long term, although I have used medications at different times, especially if I'm, really just completely debilitated and in a deep depression. As I start to crawl out of it, I can't handle the world. Like the anxiety creeps in so deeply. So I've used medications for that phase. And then as I learn tools or start to do something productive with my life, whatever I've used to really stay out of that phase of, sadness and stuff or whatever I'm going through at the time, I tend to taper off medications, because after a while, me personally, I just find that what keeps me happy and what makes me strong and what really pulls me out of everything is having a clear mind so that I can really understand and be very aware of my thoughts, what's going on, and being able to receive information. So, but I want to make sure that everybody knows that, the science has shown that there's a lot of benefits to medication for different people. And I've known many people that it worked for. So obviously, if you're struggling, just talk to your doctor. If you think you need some sort of help, figure out what works for you. But this is more of just like little tricks and tips and some knowledge of what's going on in your body. So Anxiety is basically caused by a dysregulated nervous system. So the balance between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system has really served us as a species, because the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, it is a signal that we need to be alert, that some danger or threat is present. Obviously, that was very important when we were being chased by woolly mammoths, or stuff like that, when we were hunter gatherers, and the world has been dangerous over the years. So understanding what the design and motive of the sympathetic nervous system is pretty obvious. Fight or flight is pretty obvious. It's to protect ourselves. The parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest. It has lower blood pressure. It's the time when your body pulls blood back into your gut, so that it really does give you better digestion. Obviously, with your lower blood pressure, you're more relaxed. So it really is what it says it is. So some research says your sympathetic nervous system is best known for its role in responding to dangerous or stressful situations. In these situations, your sympathetic nervous system activates to speed up your heart rate, deliver more blood to areas of your body that need more oxygen, or other responses to help get you out of danger. So it's a heightened response. And what happens is adrenaline and cortisol are usually released, which are fine on their own. People give cortisol a pretty bad rap. I'm doing a lot of research on that right now. It's super interesting to me. And adrenaline, everybody, knows about. And it makes you feel like more alert, more awake. So, in a day to day situation, you don't want to be pumped full of cortisol and pumped full of adrenaline, because you're constantly going to be feeling on edge, especially if you live in a state like that constantly. The parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for the body's rest and digestion response when the body is relaxed, resting, or feeding. It basically undoes the work of sympathetic division after a stressful situation. The parasympathetic nervous system decreases respiration and heart rate and increases digestion. So, basically, from some what I've learned so far, I believe that my interpretation of everything I've read so far is that when you have anxiety, like I said, it's a dysregulation of your nervous system. So your nervous systems don't know when to switch which one on and which one off. And you are constantly living in the sympathetic nervous system in fight or flight. And what happens is, oh, I just remembered this great story. I can't remember who said it, but they were telling a story. There was some researcher, and they were telling a story about how they were in a car with somebody and they almost got hit. And the person she was driving with calmed down pretty quickly, pretty normally, like oh shit, and then a few seconds later they were fine. They were back to complete normal. She was in like full adrenaline panic mode for minutes, and the driver asked, like, what's going on with you? What's wrong with you? And like that's when she realized that this was like the best example of how she could explain to somebody what anxiety was and what that elevated stress response was to anybody who didn't understand anxiety or felt it was fake or something like that. And I literally heard that like almost a year ago, and I remember it to this day because it's such a good analogy. So basically what happens is our bodies are wired to sense danger. That is the signal of the sympathetic nervous system, is threat, danger. And when we sense that, the normal person's, or a healthy, I don't know about normal anymore, the science is showing that I think it's like 70% of adolescent girls have anxiety and depression, and then it's like 40 or 50% of boys, or some, I think that's even higher. Like, so I don't know what normal is anymore, but a healthy, let's say, um, stress response would obviously be to have that moment of fight or flight, and then your body to very quickly recognize that there is no more danger, there is no more threat, and start to shift in back into the parasympathetic nervous system of being relaxed. So what happens when you have anxiety is you're pumping adrenaline and cortisol for longer than a healthy person would. So think about that. You're literally being pumped full of hormones for physically longer than the person sitting next to you who doesn't have anxiety. It is a physical response that, if you are unaware is happening, you have absolutely no control over. So that right there was so interesting to me, because what that made me realize is that there wasn't something wrong with me. It was that there was something wrong with the connections and the patterns between my body, my mind, how I interpret the world, and my stress responses, like how I interpret and react to stress, like as a whole, like kind of as me. And that blew my mind, because I realized that if I understood that that was happening, then there has to be a way to manipulate it. Humans are designed to change and adapt. It is the reason we have lasted as long as we did. It's the reason that we are such an innovative species, that we're the only species that we know of on this planet to, have culture, industrialize, have languages like we do, all these different things. So adapting is the most important trait of any given human being. So if I know I'm designed to change and grow and adapt, that means that I can change my own neurochemistry if I tried, if I learned how. This was so powerful to me. And this is one of the big reasons that I was able to get off medications, and why I wanted to, was because it takes a lot of cognition. It takes a lot of being able to research for long hours. For me, at least, I learned things the hard way. I'm never going to just read something once and be like, got it. Yeah, that's not going to happen for me. So I need like hours of practice. I need hours of research. I need to read. I mean, I'm on like my fifth book of the last couple months, and they're all about this same kind of stuff, just kind of from different people's takes, because it's really interesting. I get something from every different little thing, and then finally it connects and I can change something. So this was like one of the first steps, because it gave me a reason finally of why this was happening, I felt like this. I simply pump hormones in my body for longer than a healthy stress response, than, the healthy average person, which means that anxiety is not a moral failing. It means that there isn't something wrong with me in the sense of being less than, or being broken, or being not good enough, or any of the things that I've felt when I've felt anxious, or, when I see how people look at me when I'm having a panic attack. It's not that. It's a physical evolutionary response. And that I can work with, because first of all, I've always been super interested in the body and any kind of science and neurology. I'm interested in every kind of science there is, pretty much. And so right there, I was interested. It caught my attention, which meant that since it also connected dots for me of a why, and finally answered questions for me that I'd been wondering for so long, it meant that I was like all in immediately, I mean, I remember like a change, like just from learning that, and like the wires that fired or whatever. So, okay. So if we're pumping hormones longer, which means we can't regulate ourselves as quickly, then we need mental tools to calm our body, and we need physical tools to calm our mind. So that's pretty much what this entire journey is to me. I'm just learning these tools of how to balance my mind with my body and how to balance my body with my mind, first of all. And then the back end of that is, anxiety. Once you realize that, it's easy, but to just say, oh, fixed, no problem. But it's not that simple, because not only does that take a ton of practice, and it takes a ton of figuring out what works for you and what doesn't. I mean, that's why there's so many people who write about basically the same kind of thing but have different techniques, or this. That's why there's so many self-help books out there, is because something different works for everybody. And we're pretty much a combination of the ideas that come before us, ideas in, ideas out. And what we put out is different than whatever came before us, because we interpret things based on our frame of reference, our values. So the other aspect then is how you respond once this physical response happens, once this hormonal response happens, once your sympathetic nervous system is activated and you are in fight or flight and you're in anxiety. So that is a whole other aspect of it. I mean, you could learn, all day about how the body and the mind are connected, but then you have to look at yourself. And that's what I've been doing, is what are these stress responses? How do I handle it? Because that's the other thing that made it so lonely, was that I didn't feel like anybody understood how I felt, and I usually reacted poorly, and then I just felt more shame and more different and more broken, because everybody just looks at you like you're crazy. They treat you like you're crazy. They talk to you like you're crazy. You know, it's it's really hard, and even people who understand it, it's very hard to know what to do. Even me, I have watched many people have panic attacks, and it's really hard to know, what do I do in this situation for this person? So your response and how you act is your responsibility once that physical response is happening. So that's a lot of other interesting stuff that I'm working on. And we're going to kind of get into a little bit of that later. So I just found some great research that I'm still looking into about how constantly living in anxiety affects your immune system. This isn't something that a lot of people think about, but I have had back pain pretty much since I was a teenager. Like, I remember having back issues. I mean, I must have been like 16 or something like that, and going to the doctor for it. It had been bugging me for that long. I've always had silly little chronic physical things that aren't in any way severe or dangerous or affect my health too severely, but that are mostly annoying and can definitely be painful, and are just never, no one's ever able to tell me what's really wrong. Um, and it comes and goes throughout my life. So, when it's happening, I, try and get it treated, whatever. And then, they don't really, it's not really working, and they don't really know. And then I'm fine again, you know, for whatever reason. And so I stop looking into it. And then something new pops up later in life. So when I started like seeing some videos, and I'd actually bought a book a while ago that I didn't have a chance to read yet, and I'm gonna get a couple other works on it. Uh, I started hearing all these stories about people with serious illnesses, um, physical disabilities, stuff that was supposed to kill them, stuff that was supposed to keep them in a wheelchair their whole life. And as woo-y as it sounds, they healed themselves in different ways. Obviously, some of them did it through diet and exercise and, certain regiments. Other people did it through meditation. Other people did it through, therapy and treatment and then ended up walking again. It's crazy. It's really interesting to me. But I didn't dismiss it because it makes so much sense to me that from my own experience, having your body and your mind both fighting against you and wondering why the world is against you, because that's how you feel. You don't always realize that you're fighting against yourself, you're fighting against your own head, you're fighting against your own body. And it makes you feel just so alone and so hopeless. And it really creates a cycle of a victim mentality without you realizing it. It's this learned helplessness. So, hearing these stories, it kind of made me think about my own experience, and I might be seeing something that's not there. Who knows? But it made sense to me that when I looked back, whenever I have a lot of back pain, I have a lot of stress in my life. Whenever I'm having gut issues, I have a lot of stress in my life. Or even if I don't have a ton of stress, I'm going so hard trying to do multiple things, even if I'm, enjoying it and I'm loving the work, that I'm not taking care of my health because I just am not putting any priority in it. And so I'm not working out as much, I'm eating less, or I'm eating, poorly, stuff like that. And so I kind of just noticed like a bit of relatability in some of the stories. And then also, I've seen it in other people. I've seen people get really stressed out and start to have health issues. I've seen people, you know, be living in, fight or flight constantly and just have pain everywhere. It's something that just made sense to me. So this means that our constant state of fight or flight, that those hormones pumping through us constantly, that our body constantly not being able to recognize what is true danger, can affect our immune system, that our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and that our actual immune system that keeps us healthy, that fights against bacterias and cancers and heals us, can literally be also dysregulated by these stress responses, by this chronic cycle of stress responses, or continued and constant stress responses by constantly living in this state. So that means that anxiety isn't just a mental disorder, that it's something that can kill you. It's something that can destroy your life, over time. It's something that can destroy your relationships, and you don't even realize it's happening. And then at the end, not only do you feel mentally broken, but you can literally be physically broken as well. And, I see people I love struggling with this, and I struggle with this, but not as bad. And so I thought this was something that I just absolutely had to start learning more about. Because if I can like live a not annoying ailment or pain-free life, plus not feel crazy, and plus be have self-worth and all this stuff that the anxiety is blocking, I mean, fuck, I'm all in. So when you think about this in this way, like if you're constantly living in anxiety, you're constantly living in fight or flight, your sympathetic nervous system is constantly activated, this becomes your new normal. What that means is that this is going to not only affect your immune system, but it's going to affect your brain. Your brain is hardwired to hardwire whatever you repeat. That means that if you constantly live in this stress response with these hormones pumping, it means that that becomes your base state. And not only is that terrifying, because like I said, that leads to a lot of long-term health issues and stuff, which I'll get into a bunch of little symptoms and stuff later that are very common. It also means that in order to feel good, your measures are going to be more dysregulated and extreme, because if you're constantly living with fight or flight as your base state, chances are what does get your parasympathetic nervous system activated or does make you happy is going to be harder and harder to achieve. And that makes this feel even more hopeless, because if you can't figure out how to be happy because nothing works anymore, because you're constantly on high alert and you don't even realize it, then it digs the hole deeper, because it makes you feel like you don't have anything good in your life. There's nothing good about you, that you're worthless. So to kind of clarify that, I'm going to read from another article. But when stressors are always present and you always feel under attack, the fight or flight reaction stays turned on. The long-term activation of the stress response and too much exposure to cortisol and other stress hormones can disrupt almost all of the body's processes. When you face a perceived threat, a tiny region in the brain's base called the hypothalamus sets off an alarm system in the body. Through nerve and hormonal signals, this system prompts the adrenal glands found atop the kidneys to release a surge of hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline makes the heart beat faster, causes blood pressure to go up, and gives you more energy. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, increases sugar, also called glucose, in the bloodstream, enhances the brain's use of glucose, and increases the availability of substances in the body to repair tissues. So if you've related to any of this, or if you think any of it kind of hits you, I would strongly look into stuff for yourself, because personally I feel so much better, but the journey's not over. It takes a lot of figuring out, it takes a lot of trial and error, and for me it takes a lot of knowledge. I need to consume a lot of knowledge, because my brain makes very complex connections, but when it does, they resonate with me so much deeper. But that takes a lot of research, a lot of listening to experts, a lot of watching podcasts, a lot of listening to TED Talks and doctors, and reading articles in scientific journals and stuff like that, for me personally. So since I want to live in the solution, some things that have been working for me, and also some things that I've really resonated with, whether I've had a chance to really see if they work yet, whether I'm still practicing them, but I don't have all the results to kind of get back to you yet on how it's made me feel, are meditation. I know it sounds crazy, and I've meditated kind of before in my life, but I used to think that it was like, okay, just breathe in, breathe out, count to 4 on your breaths, try and have no thoughts. And while that is cool and it does work, I found that guided meditations, there's a lot out there from a bunch of different psychologists and researchers. Those are the ones I kind of gravitate towards more, because they've done the studies on, why they work, how they work, what the best structure for them is. It's not just, some random calmly talking person with a little bit of music in the background. And because they're focused in more research, and it really seems to have a different effect on me. And it's really been helping a lot with my overall mood. I just feel lighter. I haven't had all the pains go away yet, but I feel lighter. I feel happier when I wake up in the morning. I feel happier throughout the day. I find it much easier to stay grateful and live in the present, and to not worry as much, because I feel more centered, because I try and do it in the morning, and then I do it, usually later if I remember. And it's really interesting to me. So if that doesn't sound too woo-woo to you, I would look into ones for your specific issues, because that's the other thing, is the guided meditations are usually structured around specific targeted issues. So they have ones for, pain. They have ones for relationships. They have ones for motivation. If you're, really struggling, say you're an entrepreneur, they have stuff that's kind of targeted. So you have to do your own research on that, but I highly recommend looking into them. So the other thing is like recognizing the things you can control in your life and the things you can't control. Primarily people. You can't control anyone else. And the best way for me to understand this was to understand that I have to react to the world in the way that it is and not the way that I wish it were. I have to understand that everyone else has their own frame of reference, their own stressors, their own issues, their own traumas and experiences, and that I need to recognize that I have mine and they're not the same. And the only person I'm responsible for is me, and it's not easy. But even the bit that I've been able to do so far, I feel so much better. Just immensely better. Like, not hopeless anymore immediately. It was a huge change. And then, so like talking about things I can control and things I can't. So, things you can control and things you can't. You will save yourself a lot of time and effort, and so will I, if I can recognize if I'm having a panic attack over something that is out of my control. Because if it's out of my control, then the panic attack is really a waste of time and me wasting my energy. Even if it's something very traumatic, say the loss of a loved one or losing a job, it still doesn't serve you. And there's nothing you can do to change it. So continuing to live in the sympathetic nervous system as your base is just going to prolong the horrible feeling that I was already living in. So recognizing what I can control and what I can't. If it's one of those situations that is the stressor, kind of jumpstarts my awareness pretty quickly of what I need to do to regulate either my body or my mind. Another solution for me is metrics and values, because it gives me the foundation on which to build my self-worth and to gauge my progress. So like if I'm basing my self-worth in, you know, values of working hard every day at something that I care about, values of helping and being there for my loved ones, values of family and progress, then when a stressor comes along, if I have a strong foundation of values, it tends to not affect me so much. I found whenever certain situations arise, because my fear response isn't activated as quickly because I'm not as insecure, because I do have better self-worth. So the problem feels smaller because my values are what's really important in my life. It's the things I prioritize. So prioritization is another thing, but I'll get into that in a second. So having strong values and having a good self-worth has really helped me because it makes me feel less weak when a stressor or a panic attack comes along. The next possible solution is going to sound kind of silly, but I really hooked onto it. And it's one that I kind of put together from a couple different people, which is to make an important things list. So an important things list is a list of the important things you have to do in your life or your goals. So like you should have like 3 to 5 things on the top of your important things list. And most likely those will not change very much over time. But the rest of your important things list is important things that you have to get done today. Like say today is the 1st. You have to pay your rent today. That should be pretty high on your important things list because it has to be done today. It is both immediate and important. Things like Things like wanting to do an extra load of laundry so that you don't have to do one tomorrow is probably pretty low, but it gives you a range to know what is important, in what order do I have to do these important things, what things are immediate and urgent and important, and what things are not important or not urgent. And so by me having an important things list, if something happens to one of my tasks, but it's low on the pecking order of my important things list, I found that since I have a way to rationalize how important it really is to me in the scope of my day, that it's easier to deal with if something gets messed up about it. Whereas if it's at the top of my important things list and something bad happens, then I can recognize that this is probably a more rational reason to have a stress response, which means I then have to use other tools to get out of that state of anxiety versus being able to kind of dismiss it more easily. But having that list of prioritization, like what's really important, um, really helps me because it helps me realize what's important, what's not. So if something bad happens to something that's not as important, I can dismiss it much easier. Another solution is action. Action is a great solution. So I have this picture on the wall behind me, and it says, "Don't wait for your life to happen, make it happen." And I've had it for a while, and I used to think it was kind of cheesy, but I kept it this whole time because I like the colors. And now I freaking love it, and I love that I put it in my office and I get to look at it every day because action is really the reason I'm actually standing here right now. Besides all the amazing connections that I've made, besides all the great stuff that I learned from different people in my life or in content or books, it took me actually taking the first step to do something, actually getting out of bed, actually going to back to the gym for the first time, actually putting the time in when I got off work to work on this every hour that I was awake, that I was not at work. That took action. And by putting one foot in front of the other, by actually doing the thing, it helped me so much. It really is the momentum that will keep you going because it's not going to be easy in the beginning. I have so many missteps still. I don't handle things the way I want to. I still don't say the right words or what I actually mean. I still get stressed out and cry. I still have panic attacks here and there, even if they're just not debilitating anymore at the moment. But action, just learning to put one foot in front of the other by actually taking the first step. You're the only person who can take the first step. I'm so grateful for everybody in my life and all the sources I've found who have helped me to be this point, and I would not be here without it, but you have to be the one to take the first step. Nobody can do it for you. Nobody. So by taking that first step, kind of feels like shitty if you just fall right back down. And usually that can motivate me, but occasionally it's, bummed me out more. And then it's two steps back because I did take that first step and I didn't follow through. And every time that I've been really good for a long time in my life, it's because I simply took action and followed it up with more action. So don't wait for your life to happen, make it happen. And the only way to do that is to put one foot in front of the other. Because all these things I'm learning, I'm gonna fuck up. I'm gonna fuck this up so royally, probably for the rest of my life. And that's okay because I know that I'm getting better. I feel better. I'm happier. I know I'm showing up better for people in my life. And as long as I keep putting one foot in front of the other, that growth is going to exponentially change and change me. And the only way to see that result is to keep going, keep taking action, keep putting one foot in front of the other, doing the thing every day that for me it's this because it makes me grow. I'm doing this because I want to grow. And the more I do it, the more action I take, the more I will grow. And that action will compound and compound and compound. And the only way to find that result and to get that there is to keep doing it, keep taking action, because the second you get stagnant, you will fall backwards. It's just the basis of human nature. You can build a habit into your life and do it every day for a year or years. But then if something disrupts your cycle, changes, you can't do it all the time, we will immediately fall back to old habits, to what our generic programming is, which is whatever you have right now if you haven't started looking at yourself or figuring this out. And personally, I fucking hate my base programming, my default programming. My default programming is weak and entitled and anxious and really unhealthy. And I know I have the power to upgrade that programming. So, Mel Robbins has this rule called the 5 second rule. And it's basically like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then you either do the thing that you don't want to do, or that's how long you take to react. I kind of interpreted a bunch of different ways. I just heard about it, so I haven't read the book yet. But basically, how she explained it from her story was she was in a deep depression, drinking a ton, having problems in her marriage because during the 2008 housing crisis, they lost a bunch of stuff. They'd secured their business or something with their houses, and they were $800,000 in debt. And it just sent her into a deep anxiety. And she was telling herself every day, like, you have to get up, and then not doing it. And she said, finally, one day, she's like, tomorrow, you're definitely going to do it. And she said, at that moment in the morning, she just said, I'm going to shoot up out of bed like a rocket ship. And she went 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And she just shot out of bed. And she said that exact moment changed her life. And so obviously she practiced it and then kind of told people about it. It seemed to work for them. So then she wrote about it and started, looking into different studies. And there's a bunch of actual like neurobiology behind it that's really interesting, but I haven't gotten enough research on it yet. But basically, I think it's a really great tool to help with people's reactions. I mean, one of the things I'm working on the most is pausing and taking a breath and taking a moment before I respond to a stressful situation, because pretty much almost all of my regrets could have been saved for me by just taking a moment to breathe and not reacting so quickly. So practicing it in that sense, to take a moment to breathe before you react, I think is really helpful, because chances are, if you're not stressed out when you're reacting, you're going to be by whatever happens next. And also, your own stress response, your own reaction can actually heighten your anxiety, heighten that adrenaline, heighten that cortisol in you. Another one is, if you feel a panic attack coming on, whether there's an external stressor, say your car almost getting hit by somebody who wasn't paying attention, or a person or something like that. If there's none of those external stressors and you just feel an anxiety attack coming on, I think it can also be super helpful to stop and just do that, especially if you're not great at meditating, like I'm not super great yet. Just taking that 5 seconds to like count, and apparently counting down from 5 to 1 has some science behind it that I just started looking into. But just taking that moment, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like, I already feel better right now just from doing that as an example. So I thought that was really interesting. And then also, she says she uses it for motivation. If there's something she really doesn't want to do, like she still struggles with getting out of bed years later after being super successful now with all these different concepts and studies and stuff like that. And she says she still has to use it whenever there's something she really doesn't want to do, whether it's a meeting or work or getting out of bed. She says she uses it and then takes action. So it can either be, it's basically like a pause or a buildup, but either way, it's no action to then you can have action. So she says, like, she'll do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and jump out of bed. She'll literally launch herself. Or she'll just get up from her chair and go into that meeting. So I thought that was a really powerful thing too. So I really like tools that are either universal or can help me in different phases of my life, because this stuff is hard. It is not easy. And being able to use one thing for three different situations is a blessing for me, at least, because I want this to be simple, because it's hard enough to do with even the simplest tools. It's hard enough to practice. It's hard enough to realize that you are your own enemy and to stop your own mind or your own body when it has been trained to do this for its entire life. So deprogramming that training out of me, I need all the help I can get. So I had written something down a while back, and I just kept kind of fiddling with it. I still don't have it all yet, but it's a really similar concept. And so my thing is, like, when I feel anxious or triggered, I just try to remind myself, don't act. Don't do anything. Just don't act. Just pause. Just wait. Don't act. Pause. So it's really similar to the kind of first variations of using her 5 second rule. I kind of like hers better, so I guess I need to work on that. Or just use hers, probably, is what I'm going to do more. So yeah, so it's that, like, taking a moment, taking a breath, don't react. Because I find that when I react, chances are I am going to stress myself out more. And usually, if I'm in that state of heightened stress, of heightened anxiety, chances are I'm not going to come off very well if it's a person that's stressing me out, or, a place or something like that. And so then that means that I have now given permission to my circumstances or my surroundings or somebody else to then have a stress response back to me, which is going to even make it even worse for me, because I'm not going to realize what's happening in my body and my mind, and I'm just going to react more. So not only does it perpetuate the cycle of stress in me and my own thoughts and my own hormones, but it can also cause other people to have a stress response too, which is just going to make the whole cycle even worse, because once again, you can't control anybody else. And so you're not going to be able to control their stress response to that either. It's also the idea of don't do anything, don't react, don't act while you're in that state. That feeling is temporary, but actions can have lasting consequences. And am I going to let a moment or a feeling affect the rest of my entire life, or possibly ruin relationships, or get me fired from a job? Am I going to let that moment or that feeling have control over the rest of my life? No, fuck no. That shit's terrifying to me, and I've done it my whole life. All I've done my whole life is react. I've never stopped and actually thought for myself. I'm literally just felt like I was watching myself through all my anxiety and stuff. And then I look back and I'm like, who is this person? You know? And that's when it really hurts your self-worth. So having, like, a good foundation of self-worth, having a good foundation of values, being accountable to yourself, having an undeniable stack of proof that you are who you say you are, is a great way to help yourself take that moment, because you get to ask yourself, because you have a choice in every moment. You have a choice to ask yourself, do I want to be this person who reacts today? Or do I want to be somebody who is the person I envision myself as? The person I'm working to be. What does that person look like? How do I embody that person? What would they do in this situation? I'm constantly living right now in trying to embody that person. It's so funny because literally the synchronicity of, I don't know, life or how my brain works is so crazy. So I came up with all this stuff and then listened to a podcast with Mel Robbins, and almost every single thing hit something that I'd already written in my episode. It's crazy. So when I was thinking about this and writing about this concept, she said, it's not fake it till you make it. It's intentionally act like the person you want to become. Intentionally act like the person you want to become. That's what I'm trying to do, because you're not just going to magically be that person. You have to try. You have to make a choice in every single moment what that person would do, how they would act, how they would show up, how they would react, how they would carry themselves, how hard would they work. You know, it takes intention and it takes practice. So taking that moment to stop and think about what that person would do, whether it's taking that moment to just pause or using her 5 second rule, is something that I'm working on so much. And in the few times that I really did it well in the recent month or so, I felt it. I felt really good. Now, I've totally fucked it up a bunch of other times, but overall, I'd say I'm like seeing at least 100% improvement, considering that I was at 0% before. And I just feel so much better. And I think if we all just took a moment after anything happens or somebody says anything, I think we would all genuinely be happier people. And considering that I'm kind of viewing anxiety and stress as an epidemic now, I mean, this kind of feels like my mission right now for myself. And then, hopefully anybody else who's struggling with this. So, God, there's such good stuff. Ugh. Am I the only nerd here? Like, I love this stuff. And it's changing me. I feel so much better. And I'm not just talking about that because I'll sit on here and I'll talk about everything that I'm fucking up, but I will also be really honest about everything that's really working for me. And this is one of those things that's really working for me. So thank you guys for listening to all that very sciencey stuff. I hope you find it as interesting as I do. I could nerd out on this stuff all day long. I pretty much do with all of my spare time. And personally, for me, understanding how the body and the mind are connected absolutely has helped change me. Understanding that anxiety is a stress response, that it's a response of the sympathetic nervous system, and what's happening there, that it's physical hormones pumping through your body, making you feel like this, really gave me freedom in my heart and really helped me with my self-worth and helped me understand that I'm not a lost cause. And then understanding how that affects your immune system, how it can cause serious physical conditions and ailments, how it can cause, you know, other health problems. It can even kill you. It can literally cause you to have a heart attack and die. That was terrifying because nobody wants to go through that. And so many people are living like that and don't know it's happening, you know, don't know what's going on in their body, don't know what's wrong with them. And all they want is just relief from the constant anxiety and the constant pain. You know, they just want to be better. And if their doctors can't figure out what's wrong with them and medical treatments aren't working, I mean, this could be something that saves their lives, you know? And God, what a happy place that would be if we could just save somebody who's going through this. Because I feel saved. I literally feel different. I mean, we will only be able to tell with time, you know? I could fuck this all up right now. I could stop working at this and let it all fall apart. But for now, I don't think I can unlearn all the things that I've learned in the last year. I don't think I could ever forget these connections that I've made. So if I did fall off, and stop doing the work, I would always remember how to get back here, which I've never had before in my life. And that is so powerful to me. To know that there is tools, to know that there's a solution is so powerful to me. So thank you guys so much for coming to my podcast. I'm trying something new this episode. I'm done a bunch of research on the audio and video and gotten the autofocus working more. So let me know in the comments if you guys like this, if you can hear it better, if you like the video quality better, if you like me standing closer more, if you're like, ugh, no, too close. I'm looking for any constructive criticism or just comments. Speaking of the comments, I am really bad at putting myself out there. This is really hard for me, as I've said before. And I'm not trying to sell anything to anybody. I'm not trying to do this just to, listen to myself talk for hours as I edit this. Believe me, it gets really annoying. Like, I know the limits of when I get annoying. And this is something that I'm really passionate about. And I need this because it's saving my life. And hopefully, I can share something that helps anybody else on their journey if they're struggling and, need to save their own life too. And I'm really bad at social media and promoting and doing all this stuff, and so I'm struggling a lot to do that. And so I'm going to ask that if you enjoyed this video, and if you have watched any of my other videos, if you could subscribe to my channel, because I'm getting a lot of great feedback from people, and I'm also getting a lot of comments. And I don't really know if this is hitting, if this is helping anybody. I'm going to keep doing it for me, but I just want to know if anybody else finds any of this stuff interesting. In the long run, once I'm healed more, that's going to be the juice. Like helping other people with these ideas. I already feel it, but I don't feel qualified to help other people yet. I'm still working through my own shit, and the goal is to save myself and then save as many people as possible. But like I said, I don't feel qualified to save anybody right now because I can barely save myself. So I'm going to ask that you like and subscribe, because then I'll know, like, is anybody else liking this stuff as much as I do, or is this just not resonating with anybody? And I'm never going to pivot my content to stuff that doesn't matter to me, but I really enjoy this process and I'm still learning. So it's all good if nobody does, because I'll know then that this is just for me and that I need to work harder because it's not affecting anybody else in a positive way. But man, I hope that any of this was interesting, because this stuff is just changing me. I feel so much better. I know I've said that 1,000 times, but like when you go from living in such a hole for so long and hating yourself and living for decades with anxiety and cycles of depression and physical pain and feeling misunderstood and alone, to starting to feel the way that I feel right now, it's life changing. So thank you guys so much. And I might release an extra episode this week. I don't know. If not, see you guys next week. Thanks.